Welcome to our introductory course on Eternalism, the divine philosophy of the eternal worlds. Unit 13, a philosophical checkup. In Unit 13, we invite you to take the philosophical checkup, an opportunity to reflect on the foundational ideas shaping your thinking. But this raises an interesting question. Why the initial hesitation and unease associated with embracing gospel primacy issues, two-tier thinking, and a philosophical checkup when being introduced to these ideas for the first time? Let's explore this question together before moving forward. When it's time to take the philosophical checkup, it's natural to feel some reluctance or resistance. At first, it might seem like this hesitation is all about fear of being wrong, not giving the correct answer, or looking foolish. And while those worries are understandable, they're not the whole story. Let's start by acknowledging that hesitation is normal. Fear of making mistakes or being judged is part of it, but there's more going on beneath the surface. The deeper resistance comes from questions and concerns we may not have fully resolved yet. Think about it. The first source of hesitation is the uncertainty that comes with new ideas. Concepts like gospel primacy issues or two-tier thinking can feel abstract or complex, and it takes time to get comfortable with them. Then there's the complexity of applying simple principles like first things first, but applying it to real-world situations where priorities clash isn't always straightforward. Finally, there's the discomfort of two-tier thinking itself, the challenge of prioritizing one valid element over another, which can feel rigid, unfair, or even restrictive in a culture that celebrates multiple truths and subjective perspectives. When these questions and concerns pile up, they create a cumulative effect. By the time you're asked to take the philosophical checkup, a process requiring clear, definitive answers, it can feel like asking too much. Take this gospel primacy issue as an example. Which has primacy, justice or mercy? If you prioritize justice, it can feel like you're unfairly relegating mercy, an equally valid principle, to a secondary status. But if you give mercy primacy over justice, that doesn't seem entirely right either. The tension lies in being told there is one correct answer to a question where both principles seem equally important. This makes the checkup feel intimidating, not because it's inherently difficult, but because it starts to feel like a test of your adequacy rather than an opportunity to distinguish between foundational and derivative principles. But here's the thing. The confusion over which comes first, justice or mercy, isn't a failure. It's a signal. It points to where we need to focus and grow in our gospel understanding. It also highlights how two-tier thinking helps us put first things first and second things second, without diminishing either principle. By embracing this approach, we can move past the fear of being wrong or judged and see it as an opportunity to deepen our understanding. Nonetheless, before we turn to the philosophical checkup, let's introduce two examples that might help clear up some of the confusion. The first is what I call the fair play principle. Confusion number one: why is the first things first principle easy to understand, but hard to apply in real life? It could be that this principle of putting first things first is so new that it somehow feels unlike other general principles. But in reality, it's no different from any other universal principle. Easy to understand, but hard to apply in real life. Let's use the universal principle of fair play to prove this point and clear up this confusion. Notice that the fair play principle is itself a primacy issue. For example, which comes first, game rules or fair play? The answer is clear. Game rules have primacy because they provide the structure for fair play. While the idea of fair play, treating others fairly, is simple, applying it isn't. That's why referees and umpires exist to enforce rules. In football, fair play might involve tackling one's opponent, but in tennis, tackling one's opponent would never qualify as fair play. The universal principle of fair play is easy to grasp, but the complexity of its application depends on the context and the broad range of its application. The same goes for putting first things first, easy to grasp, but its application varies with the situation and scope. It's the tension between the simplicity of the principle and the complexity of its application that can feel confusing. For example, take the question of behavior. Which comes first, nature or nurture? Nature, or our genetics, has primacy because it lays the foundation for nurture, our experiences. But applying this principle to real-world dilemmas, like understanding how the two shape behavior, reveals its complexity. So, the principle of putting first things first isn't so unusual. It's another universal way to understand and relate to the world, much like fair play. With that clarified, let's move on to the next challenge. Confusion number 2. Why does two-tier thinking rub me wrong and make me feel like I'm being backed into a corner? This confusion can often be summed up in the simple but somewhat perturbed phrase, "I don't like it." At the heart of the "I don't like it" response is a misunderstanding. Two-tier thinking feels like being forced to choose one thing over another, as if one must be right and the other wrong. But prioritizing isn't about exclusion, it's about order. Still, the "I don't like it" response persists, arising from several underlying reasons, rooted in the mistaken belief that prioritizing means discarding. It feels simplistic. The idea of a single correct answer feels overly simplistic and limiting, especially in a world that values nuance and diverse perspectives. It feels unfair. Choosing between two valid principles, like justice and mercy, feels like diminishing or invalidating one of them. It feels oppressive. Being pressured to prioritize can feel like being backed into a corner, creating unnecessary resistance. This discomfort, feeling forced to choose or invalidate, stems from a misunderstanding of prioritization. Let's explore this further by turning to our second example, an airplane analogy. Landing a plane is a perfect example of putting first things first and second things second. Every step is essential, slowing down, lowering the landing gear, and finally applying reverse thrust. But the order matters. If you try to reverse thrust before you've even descended, the whole process breaks down, and you risk crashing and burning. Consider this: which takes primacy, the slowing down, and descent toward the runway, or using reverse thrust before the descent even begins? The answer is obvious, illustrating how proper sequencing ensures everything works together smoothly. The key takeaway is that prioritizing the steps doesn't mean any one step in the sequence is less important. It simply ensures that everything works together in the right way and in the right order for a safe and smooth landing. In the same way, two-tier thinking isn't about choosing between mercy and justice in a zero-sum game. It's about recognizing their relationship and ensuring foundational elements come first, allowing us to embrace clarity and reality. It's time to take the philosophical checkup. But first, consider this. Gospel primacy issues and two-tier thinking may feel uncomfortable or confusing at first, but they are neither arbitrary nor oppressive. Like fair play or the sequence for landing a plane, putting first things first is about proper order, ensuring harmony and coherence. This isn't about choosing between or diminishing valid principles. It's about understanding relationships and prioritizing what's foundational. By addressing initial resistance and clarifying misconceptions, we can embrace clarity and deepen our understanding of eternalism. With this foundation, the philosophical checkup becomes not a test of fear, but a tool to use and learn from. Congratulations on completing this portion of Unit 13. You're now ready to take the philosophical checkup, designed to help you identify and reflect on the foundational principles of the philosophy of eternalism. This checkup is presented in the Unit 13 Overview Quiz podcast, which follows this content. We encourage you to dive in, embrace the opportunity to deepen your understanding, and strengthen your grasp of these core ideas.